She stood at the front of the class, quiet, calm, and holding her violin like it was just another book bag. The room buzzed with the low hum of teenage chatter and whispers, none of which were kind. The teacher's eyes flicked over her with an unreadable look, the kind that carried more than 1,000 silent judgments, the kind that made you wonder if your very presence was a mistake. It was the first week of school. New faces, new seats, same old expectations. But for Maya, the only black student in her advanced music theory class, it felt more like walking into a spotlight than a classroom. Most of the other students came from music academies, private tutors, long family traditions of playing concert instruments. Maya came with something else entirely. She came with a story no one bothered to ask about. "Well," the teacher said with a tight smile, tapping his clipboard, "since we are sharing our musical talents today, why don't we hear from Miss Brooks?" He looked up, eyes locked on Maya. "You brought your instrument, right? A violin? Why, don't you show us what you've got?" There was a strange tone in his voice. Not quite excitement. Not quite curiosity. More like expectation. And not the good kind. A few students smirked. One girl in the back coughed a laugh into her sleeve. A boy near the front whispered, "This is going to be something." Maya looked up slowly. Her fingers adjusted the grip on her violin case. She knew this moment. Not this exact one, but ones just like it, where eyes watched not because they cared, but because they were waiting for a performance. Not a musical one, but a failure, something they could laugh about later, a mistake, an embarrassment, something that confirmed what they already believed. What they did not know was that Maya had been playing violin since she could walk. Raised by her grandmother, a former jazz violinist who used to perform in underground clubs and street corners, in Harlem, Maya had grown up with melodies in her veins and rhythms in her footsteps. Music was not a hobby for her. It was breath. It was comfort. It was power. But that part of the story was hidden behind her quiet posture and simple clothes. All the class could see was a girl who looked like she did not belong in that room, standing with an instrument they had already decided she could not possibly know how to play. They had no idea what was coming. The teacher motioned again, this time more firmly. "Come on, Miss Brooks, let us not be shy. A little music never hurt anyone." Maya nodded, calm, collected. She walked to the center of the classroom. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the kind that hovers before a storm. She opened the case slowly, revealing a violin that was not polished like the others, not brand new, but cared for, lovingly worn, like a favorite pair of shoes passed down through generations. She picked it up and placed it beneath her chin. Her eyes did not rise to meet the class. She just closed them, and then she played. What happened next would become the moment that none of them would forget. Not that day, not that year, not for the rest of their lives. But the truth is, the teacher had not picked Maya to play because he wanted her to shine. He had chosen her to make an example. He thought she would stumble, thought she would prove his quiet doubts right. He had no idea he was about to witness something extraordinary, and even less did he know the fire he had just lit in Maya, one that would change the course of everything. But just before her bow touched the strings, just before the first note escaped into the stunned silence, something happened. A knock on the classroom door. Everyone turned. The teacher frowned. The moment paused, frozen like a scene in a movie. The principal stepped in, followed by a woman no one recognized, but Maya did. Her hands dropped just slightly, eyes widening for only a second before she quickly masked her reaction. The violin stayed steady under her chin. The principal said, "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Daniels. We need to borrow Miss Brooks for a moment. It is important." Important. The whole class watched, confused, disappointed, curious. Mr. Daniels looked, annoyed, but nodded. Maya slowly lowered her violin. She did not speak. She followed them out. And just like that, the performance they were waiting for was gone. But the real story? It was only just beginning. The hallway outside the classroom was quiet, but Maya's heartbeat was not. It thudded steadily in her ears, not from nerves, but from the sudden shift, being pulled away just as she was about to prove something. Not just to her classmates or that teacher, but to herself. She glanced sideways at the woman walking next, to the principal. She looked familiar, but it had been years. The woman was tall, sharply dressed, with silver hoops in her ears and a confidence that filled the space. Maya hadn't seen her since she was a child. But the moment their eyes met, it all came rushing back. Late-night rehearsals in her grandmother's living room, stories about the greats of jazz and classical music, and this woman sitting on the couch watching Maya play with quiet approval. Her name was Ms. Carmichael. Ms. Carmichael was a respected music director, legendary in some circles. Her name carried weight. She had once played in orchestras around the world and now worked with youth programs to find and mentor talent, the kind of mentor other kids dreamed of meeting. And yet here she was at Maya's high school, pulling her out of class. No explanation. Not yet. They turned a corner, headed into the main office. Maya sat in one of the chairs, clutching her violin case. Ms. Carmichael stood by the window, watching her for a moment before speaking. "You have grown," she said simply. Maya nodded. "You remembered me? I never forgot you. Your grandmother would not have let me." There was a soft smile on her face now, but her eyes held something deeper. Thoughtfulness, a little sadness. Maya looked down at her hands. "She passed last year." Ms. Carmichael sighed, then walked over and placed a hand gently on Maya's shoulder. "I know. I heard. I'm sorry." The room went quiet again. The hum of the school day moved around them like a distant current. But for Maya, the world had narrowed down to this room, this woman, and the tight, unanswered question forming in her mind. "Why are you here?" she finally asked. Ms. Carmichael looked at her, serious now. "I saw a video of you playing. Street performance. Someone posted it online and it went around the community fast. I recognized your posture before I even saw your face. You still lean into your low notes like your grandmother." Maya blinked. "That was a random clip. I didn't even know someone filmed it." Ms. Carmichael nodded. "You played Bach like it was your own. That's not something people forget." There was a pause. Then she added, "I reached out to your school, asked to observe your progress, but it seems no one knew what you could do." Maya's expression grew guarded. "They never asked." Ms. Carmichael's jaw tightened, just slightly. "That's a problem." They sat in silence for a few seconds. The moment was heavy with what was not being said. About how teachers make assumptions. About how talent sometimes goes unnoticed. Not because it is hidden, but because no one is looking in the right place. Back in the classroom, Mr. Daniels stood by the whiteboard, trying to move on with the lesson, but the atmosphere had shifted. Students whispered among themselves. One leaned over to another and whispered, "What was that all about?" "Probably in trouble," someone replied. "No way," said another. "Did you see how calm she was? That girl's got something." Still, most of them did not know what to think. They had expected to laugh, to mock, to confirm what they already assumed. But Maya's quiet confidence, her steady hands on that violin, had shaken something. Even without a note played, she had left them guessing. Mr. Daniels paced the front of the class, pretending not to notice the whispers. He scribbled music theory notes on the board, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had not expected the principal to interrupt, and certainly not with a guest like Miss Carmichael. He had heard of her. Everyone in the music education world had. She was the type who could spot a prodigy from across a crowded hall, and if she had come for Maya Brooks, then maybe he had misjudged. Her back in the office, Ms. Carmichael pulled a folder from her bag and laid it on the desk. "There's a scholarship audition coming up. Real opportunity. Not just for college, but for touring, for mentorship, for being seen." Maya stared at the folder. "You want me to apply?" "I want you to win," Ms. Carmichael said. Maya hesitated. "Why now?" Ms. Carmichael leaned forward. "Because you're ready. You just don't realize it yet." But before Maya could reply, the principal stepped back in. "Ms. Carmichael, you're needed in the conference room." She nodded and turned back to Maya. "Think about it. I'll be around. All week." And just like that, she left. Maya sat alone in the office, heart racing, mind spinning. Her fingers tapped against her violin case absently. She wanted to feel excited, but all she felt was pressure, not from Ms. Carmichael, but from the room she had just left, from the way that teacher had called on her, from the way they all stared, expecting her to mess up, and now the stakes were somehow even higher. She walked slowly back to class, slipping in just as Mr. Daniels was explaining a chord progression. He barely looked at her, but she caught the slight pause in his voice, the glance from the corner of his eye. She sat down quietly. The violin was back in her lap, still unplayed. At lunch, the whispers continued. "Where'd she go? Is that lady her mom? Do you think she's, actually good?" Maya ignored them all, finding her spot under the trees behind the music building where she always ate alone. She opened her violin case again, but she did not play. She stared at it. Her grandmother used to say, "When you play, make them listen. Make them feel what you feel, even if they don't understand you yet." Maya was used to being underestimated, used to being told to wait her turn or prove herself again and again. But this time, something was different. She had not even touched her strings, and still, the air around her had shifted. There were eyes on her now. Expectations. Pressure. Maybe even hope. But what none of them knew, what not even Ms. Carmichael fully understood, was that Maya had been holding back for years. Not because she doubted her ability, but because she was waiting for the right moment. And maybe, just maybe, that moment had arrived. But deep inside the school, behind closed doors and quiet meetings, something else was being discussed. Something about Maya's past. Something that connected her to more than just music. Something that might change the way people looked at her forever. She had no idea. Not yet.